Hello everybody, we are back to talk about mental health wellness. I'm Defeat Mazarura and today I'm with
Bongai Munatsi.
So as promised, today we're going to talk about suicide and depression. Then we'll talk about anxiety and trauma. You know, many of us are probably going through this and we don't even know that we are going through these conditions, and they are manifesting themselves in many different ways. And today we just want to share with you how you know that you are depressed, how you can know that you've got anxiety, and how you can know that you've been through a lot of trauma and you're manifesting it in many different ways. So Wongai, please can you help us in defining suicide and how it is related to depression?
Okay. So thanks, Steph. I think all of those are really huge topics, and like we said last time when we were talking and having this conversation, you know, these are the common conditions that we're finding in Zimbabwe.
Yes.
So I would like to start maybe with depression, because suicide is actually sign or a symptom of severe depression, right? Right. So what actually happens is that, you know, depression is a mood condition. It's a condition that affects a person's mood.
Okay.
And our mood really a lot of the times is controlled by, you know, our brain, the part of our brain that controls whether we're happy or sad or how happy we are. And sometimes when, you know, that part is affected, we become depressed or sad and we can't get out of that sadness, right? As well as, you know, if we've got lots of things that are stressing us out, particularly within our environment, you find that, you know, like in Zimbabwe, the economy, the rate, and all of these things that are shifting and changing, the cost of living, unemployment, all of these struggles, poverty, COVID, all of these things are things that we can say are stressors within the environment that can then, you know, cause somebody to start feeling sad or for them to be depressed, right?
In my head, I'm just thinking to myself, we have a lot of people walking around depressed.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm listening to the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I can feel triggered to a certain extent, you know.
Okay.
Because it's pressure, you know. And the world is fast changing, and people are struggling to keep up.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking to myself, you know, how can I tell what is how does depression manifest itself?
Okay.
You know, you talked about the triggers and stuff like that, but I'm trying to think, okay, maybe have I seen a person with depression?
Okay.
Am I depressed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's possible.
So
it's possible.
how does it manifest itself?
Okay. All right. So in Zimbabwe, we are saying, you know, a study that was done showed us that, you know, for every 10 people that get to a healthcare facility, 3 or 4 of them are depressed and they don't know about it. So if you look in this room, you and me, the guys behind the scenes, you know, one of us, 2 of us, 3 of us could have depression, but actually not know about it, okay? So how we see that we've got depression is firstly feelings of sadness, you know, feeling sad, crying a lot. Sometimes sadness can manifest as emptiness or feeling numb. So, you know, people saying, I don't know, you know, how you feeling? You know, I don't know how I'm feeling. I'm just numb. I'm just there, right? You know, that's a sign of depression, right? Yeah. And in children, you know, that sadness can manifest as irritability. I remember in COVID, we had a child that was around 10 years old that was very irritable, was having a fight with his sibling, and then mom said stop that, and then he went and he hung himself. He committed suicide, hung himself on the, you know, ceiling in the house where they were building. So it's that, you know. So sometimes that irritability that you're just saying, I'm just feeling irritable, can be a sign, but mostly we see that in children. So feeling sad. Then the second thing we see with depression is, you know, a lack of interest or pleasure in things that you usually like to do. So you usually like to cook, bake, go to work, things like that, but you have no pleasure in it, no interest in it. It's no longer fun, right? That's again a sign of depression. And we look for these 2 mostly, and then, you know, the other 3, either one of these 2, sadness, loss of interest, and then the other ones that I'm going to talk about. And if you've got 5 of these, we then say somebody has got depression. So some of the other signs and symptoms difficulty sleeping. So this can be in an extreme. We say insomnia or hypersomnia. Somebody can't sleep, insomnia. Hypersomnia, they're sleeping a lot.
All right.
So, you actually increase the number of, the hours that you sleep, or you're always sleeping, Then the other sign that we know that somebody's got depression is a change in appetite. Okay. So when somebody is no appetite, I don't want to eat food, not hungry, the other symptom is, eating too much. Okay. Binge eating, comfort eating. Okay. So you find that this is very common with women a lot. Some of those statements that we make, And in COVID, you can see that a lot of people gained weight. Yes. We were at home, we were chowing every little thing, because we were stressed and a lot of times depressed because we didn't know what life was going to be like. So the comfort eating, and you see it in the weight gain. So all of those shows that we see, The Biggest Loser, and then you see, people at My 500-Pound Life, people are comforting themselves with food because they are depressed. And then other signs and symptoms of depression is difficulties thinking, difficulties concentrating, and difficulties making decisions. This is why depression is now being called one of the most debilitating conditions, because if you're having problems thinking, concentrating, and making decisions, you can't function at work. It then affects your functionality. So even if it's a child who's doing exams or whatever, if they can't concentrate, they can't learn. And they can't understand and focus what they're doing. This is also why you find that, with the decision making, you ask somebody, what do you want to eat? I don't know. Where do you want to go? I don't know. What do you want to wear? I don't know. What do you think I should wear? It's very difficult for people to then make decisions when they are depressed. And this is why people then are so stressed, and if you've got a partner or spouse who's struggling, you are like, you never make a decision about anything. You always say whatever you want. You're never assertive. You're never this, but they're actually depressed and people don't actually know it. And then because of all of those things, you get a sense of hopelessness, a sense of worthlessness. I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as others. And then you also get people now struggling, to cope, especially with the hopelessness. This is where then somebody says, it's better if I die.
All right.
Right. And so suicide actually comes out of untreated depression. So you find that a lot of people in families then see suicide as, it can be, it's a suicide spirit. But what's happening is that, depression can actually also be genetic.
Right.
And so it can be in the genes and it can be expressed generationally. So this is why people can count, from generations past to say, there was this person, this aunt who committed suicide. Now in this generation, there's this child who committed suicide. And then there's a grandchild in the next generation who commits suicide. It's actually that within the family, depression is undiagnosed. Depression is not treated, and then it comes from mild depression to moderate to severe depression, where somebody is feeling hopeless, where somebody is feeling like, I can't cope and I can't do this. So we can see all of this where when somebody is depressed, they're sad, they withdraw, they don't want to talk to people, they are, they're always sort of a lot of the times feeling tired, there's fatigue that also comes with depression, no motivation. So that's that lady, that you see who wakes up in the morning, has no energy to clean her house, has no energy to do anything, to take care of her kids, has no energy to do anything literally. And in the community, did you see, that towel that, and things like that. But if somebody is well, again, depression makes it difficult, and every mental illness makes it difficult for people to take care of themselves, bath, comb their hair, care about their appearance. And so when all of that is happening, which is, they're just scruffy. I don't know why she's so scruffy.
But they are struggling. They're really struggling. They're like, whatever happens, happens.
Whatever happens.
If the
yes.
world doesn't accept me.
Yes. And so they have no energy. They can't work. They can't focus, and a lot of those things. And so it's actually a mental health condition that has all of these signs and symptoms. And so you find, again, within the community, you find people saying, izinto zamakiwa, these are the conditions of white people, and they're not,
white people disease.
Yes, they're not really relatable to us, and this is why we then just end at kuzvitisa, kujaidzwa, and all of those kind of things. But somebody is actually really struggling. And so when somebody is depressed, they cannot wish it away. And I hear a lot of the times where people are motivating people and saying, you just have to make yourself strong. You just have to will yourself to go. You just have to. But when a person is depressed, it's very hard. It's like being shut up in a dark room. You can't see the door. You can't see the windows. You can't see a way out. And this is why a lot of the times people then, end up deciding that it's better if I wasn't here, if I died, if I slept and never woke up. And this is all of these things that people say, around suicide. So I was saying suicide is a process,
okay,
and it starts from thinking about it, and then somebody makes a plan and then they act. What's important a lot of the times is for us to catch people when they're thinking about it before they actually are going to the plan and, they're acting on it.
Sorry, can I interrupt you there?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just my thinking.
Okay.
I'm not a medical professional, but
yeah.
I'm thinking anxiety.
Yeah.
And maybe trauma.
Yeah.
The other topics we spoke about.
Yeah.
Depression, doesn't it start with maybe trauma that then starts leading to anxiety that then leads to depression?
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me in my mechanical thinking or whatever it is, but let's talk about anxiety.
Yeah. Look, all of these conditions, are separate and they are different conditions all by themselves.
Okay.
But it's very possible for them to be comorbid, which means that somebody can have depression and then have anxiety. So you can have depression with anxious distress. You can have trauma as a result of something traumatic that has happened. So maybe if we sort of talk about them sort of separately first and then talk about how they link and in ways that they can link, right?
Okay.
So anxiety is simply about, worrying that something bad is going to happen and that, or you don't have enough resources within you to be able to deal with the situation.
Correct.
So anxiety is a normal part of our lives. Like, for example, having this conversation with you can be anxiety provoking, right?
Okay.
Standing in front of a class and a crowd and being able to, having to deliver a speech or to write an exam, naturally that will cause anxiety, right?
Okay.
And then, but anxiety now starts becoming a problem when it is now stopping us from doing things that we should be able to do. Like, for example, if I was to sit here and my heart was pounding and I couldn't talk and no words would come out and my mind would go blank and I would be so worried that I wouldn't be able to sleep the night before this, and I would just be all over the place. I'm sweating, I have stomach cramps, sometimes even immediate diarrhea, sometimes people can even collapse and faint, because the anxiety is just too much and a lot. So anxiety is kind of linked with panic attacks, which is where a lot of people, when you're anxious, your mind keeps on telling you you're not going to be able to do it, something bad is going to happen. You end up avoiding those kind of places and things that, that you feel the anxiety is going to be, manifested and centered. And anxiety can be generalized. It can be about everything. So you just have a general sense of anxiety about everything. Going to work, waking up, life is just going to go wrong in some way. But it can also be specific. So specific phobias for heights, and phobias for spiders, for snakes, for, all of those things around. I'm claustrophobic. I can't be in closed spaces. I can't, go on a plane on escalators. It can be anxiety about those particular things. It can also be about health, where you find that with COVID, we met so many people who are now saying, I have COVID, constant sanitizing. Or people who start saying to you, test me, I've got cancer, I've got HIV, I've got this, I've got that. So there's a lot of health anxiety and, hypochondriacs that then always have some condition that they're always tracking or thinking or Googling. So with health anxiety, there's a lot of Googling. And then, oh my God, I feel this, I've got a neck pain. Oh, it must be cancer. I've got a headache. It must be a tumor. I've got back pain. It must be. So anxiety can manifest in all those ways as well.
That is so real.
Yeah. And then also socially, social anxiety, where people can't interact with others and they find it very difficult to be in social spaces. So if you visit me, I've got social anxiety, I'll stay in my room and won't come and greet you. You say, Shwanovaira. You go to family functions, we're all around, we're all talking, we're all interacting. But a person with social anxiety will start worrying, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I embarrass myself? Will people understand me? What if I make a mistake? And so that will keep them from actually interacting. So they'll be in their head all the time thinking about what's happening, right? And trauma is kind of linked, right? Because trauma is actually triggered by things that threaten our safety. So things like war, cyclone Idai, accidents, domestic violence, where you're bitten to an inch of your life and you think you're going to die. So everything that threatens health, that threatens safety, things like pandemics, COVID, HIV. They're things that threaten life, they threaten health, they threaten safety. Those are the things that sort of trigger trauma. And trauma then manifests as, somebody, constantly thinking about what happened. Their mind takes them back to that spot. So if you're in a car accident, your mind keeps on going back to the accident. You keep on hearing the sounds. You want to stop that, but it keeps on coming in, right? Also, you also sort of start having problems sleeping. You have nightmares. You're constantly going back to that place. You have flashbacks. So you could be doing what you're doing, but your mind goes back to that. Right? It's also an avoidance. It also causes like an avoidance of those things. So you're in an accident, you then get into a space where you're afraid of getting into a car. And this is where you see those people who are sitting on the edge in a car, like they are driving with you. If you are, they're on the brake, just like, like the driver, everything that's happening in that car, they're on edge, they're anxious. And they're very hyper vigilant. So if you've been raped, you then also start avoiding relationships, you avoid intimacy, you are always watchful that something bad is going to happen, and never settled. The world doesn't feel safe. And so it's those kind of things that then sort of manifest with that. And if they're not treated, they become worse and worse, deaf. And this is where you find that sometimes people can then say, I'm keeping on having these nightmares. This situation never seems to end, and therefore maybe it's better if I end my life. So suicide and hopelessness are linked. People end up just feeling hopeless. The situation is never going to end, and then they, decide to kind of take their lives.
All right, can I take you back?
Yeah.
You spoke about treatment.
Yeah.
That word for me was like, okay, so there's actually treatment for these things. What is treatment, and what does it look like, Because we spoke about mental health versus
mental illness. Yeah.
Yeah, So now when we talk about anxiety, when we talk about depression, and we talk about trauma, these three conditions, and you speak about treatment, what does that look like?
Okay. A lot of the times, treatment, depending on the condition, is medication and psychotherapy, which is counseling and talk therapy, which is at a different level to probably the counseling that we are used to in terms of our lay counselors, what we get from church, what we get from, I'm going home and I'm just going to talk to a counselor, you know. But this is sort of the specialty of your psychiatrist, your clinical psychologist, who then sit down and try to understand what is the cause and the root of the problem that you are sort of facing and having, whether it's depression or anxiety, and even trauma. So with trauma, because of the intrusiveness of these thoughts that they keep on coming back, sometimes they can be very paralyzing, that you actually cannot do anything. Sometimes you can start, hearing voices, seeing things, hearing the sounds that you were hearing whilst all of the bad event or what was happening and the traumatic situation was happening. So you will definitely need medication to help you with that. And I know that this is where people actually have a problem with mental health conditions. You hear a lot of people saying, mudaundipa mshongo mapenzi. Mudaundipa mapiritsi emapenzi.
I think people are fine all the way.
Yes.
They think you can just sweep it away, or you can just drink it away. But the actual treatment talks about medication.
Yes.
And I feel like in our cultures or in our nation or in our African context, the moment you start to take medication, it's an issue. Tell me about this medication so that people can understand that, you're not crazy, because people call them crazies. There's all this stigma around mental health, and someone can clearly be depressed. Someone can clearly have anxiety. Someone is clearly traumatized by issues they can't even tell anybody about. And you were saying this is where we come to clinical psychologists like yourself. And we have therapy. Let's talk about medication. What does it do?
Okay. So Def, what I think is important for people to understand is that the brain is an organ.
Okay.
Just like any other part of the body.
All right.
And if organs fail, the brain can also fail, and it can also have challenges. that will actually need medication to control it and to regulate it.
We have never learned that.
Yeah.
We have never looked at the brain as an organ.
Yeah, it's an organ that's actually part of the body. And
Wow.
the brain, just like every other part of the body, needs, certain things to make it function. And in layman's terms, and the simplest way I can put this is that, the brain needs chemicals to help it function well. So if these chemicals have an imbalance, or if somebody has got a challenge or an issue, let's say the brain is not formed well in a particular area, the brain will actually need medication, just like your heart, your lungs, any other part of the body will need medication to help it work well. Okay. So if the brain is disturbed or there's an imbalance in these chemicals that help the brain to function, you will get changes in the things that the brain affects or controls.
All right.
So the brain controls how we feel. The brain controls what we see, what we hear, taste, smell, all of these things. It controls our body in totality, in completely, right? And so if that part of the brain, like the part that controls the mood, is affected, your mood is going to be affected. No matter what we give you or what we do to make you happy, you'll still feel sad. Until that place, or there's a balance in those chemicals, there will be a problem. And this is why when a person is severely depressed, they actually need, medication to help the brain to actually regulate itself, to get back to that place where somebody is feeling good again. The same thing with anxiety. There are techniques that we can teach somebody to help them contain their anxiety in therapy, right? Through counseling. But sometimes it can be so overwhelming that somebody will need anti-anxiety medication to help them cope with a day. Like I was saying with trauma, if you're hearing voices and you're seeing things, it's actually the chemistry of the brain that has been affected, because the brain is what controls what you see and what you hear and what you smell. And so it's not actually a personal failing within a person that they're hearing voices, seeing things, they're feeling like there are things crawling in their body, or people are putting microchips in their head and people are taking ideas from their brain. It's actually that the organ, the brain, has failed. There are certain things that are not working well, and the medication comes to restore that balance so that the brain can start functioning well again.
Wow. I think that's a lesson we needed as people.
Yeah.
And I think for me personally, growing up, I've never heard of people who are medicated for any of these conditions, because they're not spoken about.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Wongai. We've got more stuff to talk about concerning these topics, and we're just going to wrap it up right now. We are available to answer your questions. You can just reach us as you watch these videos, and we can help you. As we wrap up our next session, we're going to talk about substance abuse.
Yeah.
And substance abuse is on a high.
Yeah.
All around. It's before we used to hear that young adults and adolescents, are doing drugs.
Yeah.
But when it comes to substance abuse, there is a long list of substances that people are taking.
Yeah.
So join us in our next session as we talk about substance abuse. And if you have anyone in your home who you feel like they are abusing substances and they are not able to control themselves, please join us and share with your friends and family as we do our next session. Thank you. Thank you, Wongai.
Thanks, Steve.
See you soon.